Welcome to the Debrief. I'm Diane Macedo. Our top stories this morning: the president's plan for the border as immigration takes front and center on the campaign trail. We're also taking a look at why thousands of Google employees walked out of the job. And finally, a bizarre case of possible kidnapping on a shuttle bus full of people. We'll have the latest on those stories. But first, here are your top headlines.
Also up this morning, the trade gap. The Commerce Department now says it grew for the fourth straight month in September to $54 billion. With the president talking this week with China's leader about trade, the trade deficit with China hit a new record over $40 billion. The funeral is set for this morning for the final victim of last weekend's attack on a synagogue in Pittsburgh. 11 people were killed. The suspected shooter has pleaded not guilty on 44 counts. A Japan Airlines pilot has pleaded guilty after failing a breath test just before a trip from London to Tokyo. Officials say his blood alcohol level was nearly 10 times over the legal limit. Two parents from Oregon who ate some of the candy their kids picked up on Halloween had to go to the hospital. They say the gummy candy, which looked like it was sealed in a package, was laced with methamphetamine.
Toyota is recalling over 1 million vehicles around the world that may have airbag problems. A short circuit could cause the airbag to go off at the wrong time.
It's the must-see attraction of New York City. In Central Park, a mandarin duck spotted floating in a pond, thousands of miles from its native home of East Asia. People flocking to the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of this brilliant bird. Right now, it's unclear how he got there. Local zoos saying he's not theirs.
Welcome to the Debrief. I'm Diane Macedo. We have just 4 days left until the midterm elections, and enthusiasm and engagement appear to be at record highs. Karen Travers is outside the White House for us. Karen, I know the president has been hitting the campaign trail hard, and he seems to have settled on a closing argument.
Yeah, this closing argument from the president, Diane, is focused entirely on illegal immigration. The president talking about what the White House says is a crisis at the border. And the White House is hoping that this issue revs up Republicans. And that's why you see him out there every day on the campaign trail. And now here at the White House also talking about this issue. Yesterday, the president made a series of statements on this. Take a listen to what he had to say.
If you don't want America to be overrun by masses of illegal aliens and giant caravans, you better vote Republican. These courageous Americans did not shed their blood, sweat, and tears so that we could sit at home while others tried to erase their legacy, tear down our history, and destroy our proud American heritage. We didn't do that. So this isn't an innocent group of people. There's a large number of people that are tough. They've injured, they've attacked, and the Mexican police and military has actually suffered. And I appreciate what Mexico is trying to do. We're putting up massive cities of tents. The military is helping us incredibly well. I want to thank the Army Corps of Engineers. They've been so efficient, so good, so talented. We have thousands of tents. We have a lot of tents. We have a lot of everything. We're going to hold them right there. We're not letting them into our country.
And the president making that argument very crystal clear in his view. If Americans don't want this country overrun by what he says are illegal aliens and caravans, you have to get out and vote Republican. Diane, it's also interesting. There's a big jobs report out today, positive numbers, big month of October. The White House was calling it incredible, but that is not the centerpiece of what the president is saying on the campaign trail. And many critics are saying he's talking about this caravan and these immigrants to stoke fear, to really scaremonger people and get them out to the polls based on what could be false statements.
Yeah, Karen, we're going to talk about that jobs report with Rebecca Jarvis in just a little bit. It is interesting that the president isn't focusing on that, but there seems to be a lot to unpack in what he's actually saying. You know, with the exception of Native Americans, we are a country of immigrants. So what does he mean when he's talking about people destroying our heritage or erasing our legacy?
Yeah, that's what people want to know. It's the good question, because the president is talking about this in broad brushstrokes, but clearly trying to rile people up, to make people convinced that there's this invasion coming to the U.S.-Mexico border. That's how he's referred to this, an invasion, and that's needing of a military response. The president first talking about a 5,000 troop deployment, now considering upping that number to about 15,000. And yesterday, Diane, the president was asked if there was any scenario where he could see those troops firing on these migrants. He said that if they throw rocks, then the military would respond. But of course, that's been something that's been disputed about who these people are. It's families, it's moms with children. It's not this aggressive band of people heading straight to the U.S. border.
Well, there is something else he said, which is that, people in the caravan have attacked and the Mexican police and military have suffered. Those are the president's words. What's he referring to there?
Yeah, he's referring to some of the skirmishes that we've seen, but our reporting from down there has been that that's not defining these groups of people as they're making their way through Mexico. But that does not seem to matter to the president right now. He is keying in on that to justify his use of sending the military down to the border. And again, this all gets back to using fear as a motivator to get people to the polls instead of using the jobs report, instead of using health care. This is the message that the president has centered on. And I think it's also notable, yesterday the president was talking about an executive order going after asylum seekers. This was not something he signed yesterday. It's not something that's finalized. He says he's still working on it. But Diane, the president came out yesterday to say that going forward, only people that cross the border lawfully at official points of entry will be allowed to seek political asylum. That would be a big change from the current law. But again, notable, he didn't sign anything. This didn't happen yesterday, but he certainly wanted to come out yesterday, talk about it very forcefully, and use it as another critical talking point to get people out to the polls.
All right, Karen Travers from outside the White House. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, as Karen mentioned, the president is sending troops to the border, and he does say it is possible they could open fire. Let's listen to some of his statements.
Them firing upon any of these people? Could you see it?
I hope not. I hope not. It's the military. I hope there won't be that. But I will tell you this, anybody throwing stones, rocks, we will consider that a firearm, because there's not much difference. They want to throw rocks at our military fights back. We're going to consider it. I told them, consider it a rifle.
I want to bring in our own Louis Martinez to get his reaction on that. Louis, what do we know so far about the president's plan with these troops and what they're actually at the border to do?
Well, Diane, they are not doing law enforcement. That is the role of Customs and Border Protection. That's CBP. They're the ones that are going to have officers on the border. They have officers right there. They're the ones that interdict migrants as they come across the border. The U.S. military, the active duty troops that are being sent, what they are doing is they are providing support, logistical support, technical support. They're going to be doing construction. They're going to be building vehicle barriers. They're going to be erecting some fencing. They're going to be constructing some tents to house additional CBP personnel, not migrants. So what the president is talking about here is slightly different, if not very different, from what U.S. military officials have been telling us here about what the role is of the military. When he says that rocks may be considered firearms, that would be, let's call that the rules of engagement, what officials call the use of force. There are set rules in place for when military service members can use force in response to a proportional threat. So when there is a threat, you use proportionals. It starts with non-lethal and then it moves forward potentially to a different level. But since the military will not be involved in law enforcement, I don't see a scenario where they're going to be actually that close to the migrants. So when the president says that they may fire back, I'm just not clear how that could happen. But either way, the rules of force would not call for that to happen immediately because, again, it's a proportional response, not an immediate go to firearms.
All right, Louis Martinez from ABC News at the Pentagon. We appreciate it, Louis. Thanks. And now let's get to that jobs report. Seems like good news all around. Let's get to Rebecca Jarvis to break it all down for us. Rebecca, what's the big headline here?
The headline here, Diane, is that this was a very strong jobs report. 250,000 jobs added in the month of October. The unemployment rate remains steady at 3.7%. That is the lowest level since 1969. And the biggest thing in this report that analysts like is the wage growth. 3.1% wage growth in hourly earnings over the last year. That's the best wage growth since before before the recession began. So that's what people are looking for. They want to know what's in their paycheck. We also know that there are now more job openings than there are people looking for jobs. And if you look in the details of the report, there are some very interesting findings. For one, the job gains are overall across industry groups: manufacturing, construction, warehousing, trucking, even mining, adding jobs in the month of October. Women, interestingly enough, have a lower unemployment rate, just slightly, fractionally lower unemployment rate than men do in the country, and women are gaining jobs at a faster pace than men are gaining jobs. But Diane, overall, a very strong report.
So the market has been pretty volatile lately. Does this mean we can now cue up the band, sound the confetti, happy days are here again?
Not exactly. No, it's an interesting thing. You look at the stock market, and a lot of people confuse the stock market with the economy. The stock market is not the economy. The economy is what's happening, how we're feeling about things, how we're spending. And frankly, consumers with wages rising should be feeling pretty good about the state of the economy. Of course, you go out and ask a single consumer, it's all about their job, their life, their house, and that can really change depending on who you're speaking to.
So in many ways, this jobs report is almost a better indicator than just looking at the stock market.
In some ways, yes, actually, but in some ways it's a lagging indicator because it's looking backwards as opposed to looking forwards. It's really important. The section of the year that we're heading into, the holiday season, is really important. Retailers make most of their money during this time, and our economy, 70% of our economic growth comes from what we as consumers are doing, how we're behaving. The more money we spend, the more growth that is generated in our economy. So it's really going to be an important holiday season from a retail standpoint. And from a stock standpoint, the other component here is what the Federal Reserve does next. The Federal Reserve doesn't want the economy to be too hot or too cold. They want it to be just right, like the porridge. And the way that they
like the porridge,
exactly,
I like that.
and
we're bringing back the Three Bears, people.
Exactly. And the way that they regulate whether or not the economy gets too hot or too cold is based on interest rates. And as the jobs picture looks better and better, the Federal Reserve has more and more reason to hike interest rates. But hiking interest rates.
They're such Debbie Downers.
No, they're trying to make sure that there's equilibrium and balance in our economy. That's the bottom line for them. And what's important for people out there to think about is as interest rates go up, so does that credit card. So do new mortgages, so do new cars.
Car leases.
It's meant as sort of a lever on the economy to keep things from getting too hot, because if prices get too high and climb too fast, all of a sudden everything is unaffordable for us.
So here's what I'm hearing. If all the viewers buy me a gift for the holidays, we're improving the economy. Is that the takeaway?
Do your part, America. Take care of Diane.
That's what you need to know about the jobs. No, Rebecca, I really appreciate you breaking it down for us. Thanks so much. And now to that worldwide walkout at Google. Thousands of employees are protesting the way they say the company handles sexual harassment. Whit Johnson has the latest on that. Good morning, Whit.
Hey, Diane, this was one of the largest and most publicized company-wide protests of the Me Too era, a scene repeating itself around the world from New York, California, London, Singapore. Google employees walking off the job, speaking out against sexual harassment and demanding change. They carried signs like "Time's Up Tech" and "Not OK Google," a global walkout against the tech giant's alleged handling of sexual misconduct allegations. Now, this comes just 1 week after the New York Times reported that there was a $90 million severance package for Andy Rubin, the creator of Android mobile software. The report says the 2014 payout came after Google concluded a sexual misconduct allegation against him was credible. Now, Rubin denies the allegation, firing back on Twitter, saying, quote, "The New York Times story contains numerous inaccuracies about my employment at Google and wild exaggerations." Now, Google employees here are asking for specific changes. They're demanding an end to pay inequality. They want reports on sexual harassment cases within the company, and they want Google to make the process easier for employees who come forward with complaints. Google says they support their employees who participated in the walkouts, and they are listening, and they hope to take all of their feedback in and hopefully turn that into some real legitimate action going forward. Diane?
All right, we'll keep an eye on how that progresses. Whit Johnson for us. Thanks, Whit. And now to those rising concerns over safety at school bus stops. After 2 more crashes yesterday, one of them deadly, Paula Ferris is in Westbury, New York, with the latest on that. Paula?
And hello to you, Diane. As you just said, it has been a tragic week. 5 children have died at school bus stops this week alone. And parents, while you can't control every variable about the bus stops, such as reckless drivers or distracted drivers, you can equip your children with potentially life-saving advice.
This week, at least 5 tragic accidents at school bus stops across the country. The latest happening Thursday, this crash in Tampa, leaving 2 adults and 5 children injured and backpacks scattered on the shoulder of the road.
There's a lady that was holding one of her, the little boy, and the little boy, when she got hit, the little boy flew out of her hand. He hit the ground and she flipped and hit her face.
Also on Thursday in Pennsylvania, a 2nd grader was killed waiting at his school bus stop. And earlier this week in Indiana, 3 young siblings were killed as they were about to board their bus on a busy road. That bus stop now being moved to the side streets of a neighborhood, and the driver has been charged with reckless homicide. Close calls like these are a daily occurrence across the country, nearly plowing down children time and time again. A 2018 survey of school bus drivers in 38 states and Washington, D.C. found that nearly 84,000 vehicles passed their buses illegally on a single day. That is an estimated 15 million violations during the school year alone. Alex Epstein is the director of transportation safety with the National Safety Council. He says while parents cannot control other drivers on the road, it is paramount to talk to your kids about bus stop safety.
And Diane, just to reiterate, once the school bus has pulled up, make sure your children are waiting on the curb at least 3 giant steps away from the school bus. And if they have to walk in front of the bus, make sure they take 5 giant steps, or about 10 feet. Make direct eye contact with the bus driver before they cross. Never walk behind the bus because of the blind spot. Tell your children absolutely no horseplay. Try to get there as soon as you can, as early as possible in the morning. And also, parents, you do have a say in the matter. If you're uncomfortable with the location of the bus stop, say something to your school district, because they're always reevaluating locations. Diane.
Great tips, Paula. Thank you. And speaking of buses, some passengers in Long Beach, California, got quite the scare on a shuttle bus when the driver started going the wrong way and then refused to stop. Some of those passengers called police saying they'd been kidnapped. Others even jumped out of the windows to get off the bus. Will Carr has more on this bizarre story. Will?
Good morning, Diane. We're covering a pretty crazy story at Long Beach. It was supposed to be a fun night of terror for a lot of people on a bus. They were going to a haunted house, but that's when things turn scary. These people say that they were on the bus and the bus driver, you can see right there, refused to stop driving. They were supposed to be driving for about 10 minutes, go to the house, and then get off and have a great night. But the bus driver drove in the wrong direction for about half an hour. It got to the point where the passengers are yelling at the bus driver. They're asking him to stop, but they say he just wouldn't do it. So they ended up started going out the windows of the bus. They described it as a terrifying couple of moments when they were trying to figure out exactly what was going on. They called 911. Authorities responded, and they ended up charging the bus driver, a 60-year-old, with kidnapping. Now, there were 20 to 30 people on this bus. You can see the video right here, the cell phone video, people coming out of the windows. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Diane.
Such a strange story, Will. Thanks. And finally, the weekend is almost here, and let's find out what the weather has in store for us. Rob Marciano is in our weather headquarters with the forecast. Rob?
Hello, Diane. Great to be with you. We are still dealing with this slow-moving system that has left a trail of destruction, especially across the south the past 2 days. 136 damaging storm reports, including at least 8 confirmed tornadoes. And we've got proof in some of this video out of Alexandria, Louisiana. That's the central part of that state. Some serious damage done there. Just to the north, outside of Shreveport in LaSalle Parish, this mobile home completely destroyed, but the family inside of that home getting a warning on their cell phone before the storm hit, and they managed to get to a safer spot and survived. The warnings do work, and we are happy about that. All right, the threat for severe weather today is really across much of the East Coast this afternoon, and now just posted a high wind watch for the Northeast, with kind of the second low that's going to be coming through. The first one today is kind of weak. The second one goes through Raleigh later on tonight, and that will strengthen and kick up some rain and thunderstorms and some heavy rain that probably will cause some urban flooding in the I-95 corridor through tomorrow morning. And then the winds kick in behind this, and that's where we expect the highest winds tomorrow afternoon. But rainfall totals could easily be 3+ inches, and this is an area that has seen, well, a lot of rain so far this fall, so it's not going to take much to flood. Good news is this should be all cleared out for the most part on Sunday. Macedo, back to you.
All right, Rob Marciano for us. We appreciate it, Rob. Thanks. And that does it for us on the Debrief today. Remember, you can catch your headlines all day long at abcnews.com or at your ABC News app. For ABC News Live, I'm Diane Macedo. Happy Friday, everyone. Have a great weekend.